The alchemist's choice, we have traversed the labyrinth of Schopenhauer's, the art of controversy, from its shadowed corridors of rhetorical stratagems to the high chambers where debate meets metaphysics, and finally into the marketplace of lived experience where these ideas breathe, wound, and sometimes heal. Now we arrive at the precipice of the most vital question: what will you do with this knowledge? Schopenhauer has armed us with a merciless understanding of how persuasion really works. He has shown us the gears behind the curtain, the strings that move puppets in the theater of discourse. But unlike the cynical manipulator who sees this as a playbook for dominance, or the naive idealist who rejects it as a manual for villains, we must become something more dangerous: the conscious participant. The threefold path every student of this text faces a trilemma upon closing its pages. The path of the opportunist wielding these stratagems without conscience, turning every conversation into a battlefield where victory is the only virtue. This is the hollow triumph, for as Schopenhauer himself knew, the will's hunger is insatiable. Win today, and tomorrow demands new conquests. The path of the ascetic renouncing debate altogether, retreating into silence to avoid the corruption of rhetoric. Yet this too is a kind of surrender, a concession that the public square belongs to the wolves. The path of the alchemist transforming base tactics into gold by using them defensively and to spot a logical fallacy is to neutralize its power. To name a manipulation is to dissolve its spell. This path demands the discipline of a monk and the discernment of a sage, for it requires deploying truth as both sword and shield. The call to vigilance. Schopenhauer's greatest lesson is not in his 38 stratagems, but in the space between them. The unspoken revelation that most human conflict is not a failure of logic, but a crisis of awareness. We lose debates not because we lack facts, but because we fail to recognize the psychological terrain. We succumb to bad arguments not through stupidity, but through unexamined emotional triggers. This is why the art of controversy transcends its 19th century origins. In an age of deepfakes, algorithmic outrage, and epistemic warfare, Schopenhauer's taxonomy of persuasion is not just relevant, it is survival literature. The post-truth era did not abolish reason. It simply weaponized irrationality with industrial efficiency. To navigate this landscape without becoming either a pawn or a predator, we must develop what might be called rhetorical immune defense. Recognize the tells, for example, when a speaker suddenly shifts from specifics to grand abstraction stratagem. 23. Dilute the argument. Interrogate the scaffolding. What must I already believe for this claim to hold? Exposing stratagems says hidden assumptions. Respect the meta. Understanding that some debates are not about truth but tribal signalings. 38's natural habitat. The transformational invitation. Here lies the alchemical secret. Schopenhauer never states outright. Mastery of controversy is ultimately mastery of self. Every stratagem we recognize in others is a mirror of our own potential deceits. Every rhetorical trap we dissect trains us to spot the same mechanisms in our internal monologues. This is the transformational call, not merely to win arguments, but to elevate discourse. Not just to defend against manipulation, but to forge a self resistant to its own worst impulses. The true art is neither domination nor withdrawal, but the third way, to engage so clearly that even when you lose, you reveal the game. The choice is yours. Will you wield these insights as a scalpel or a dagger, as a lantern or a torch? Schopenhauer's ghost cares not. His work was never about morality, but mechanics. But we, the living, must care profoundly. For in the end, the art of controversy is simply the art of being human, refracted through the prism of conflict. And that prism, like all others, bends toward either light or shadow. The alchemy of discourse, from contest to illumination, in the dim, flickering theater of human conversation, where shadows often pass for substance and thunder for truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his art of controversy, stands as a strange and solemn guide. He does not offer us salvation. He offers us a lantern, not one that chases away all darkness, but one that teaches us to see within it. Now, as we approach the final cadence of this journey, let us gather the threads of metaphor, principle, and lived resonance that have woven through the previous stages and hold them to the light. What emerges is neither a tidy conclusion nor a comfortable affirmation, but a quiet call and invitation to transform not only how we speak to others, but how we reckon with the voice that speaks within. The text begins as a tactical manual, but it does not end there. By the final page, it has become an act of philosophical judo, redirecting our attention from the opponent to ourselves. It does not simply expose the other's illusions, it lays bare our own. In this way, it works more like a mirror than a sword. We began this exploration imagining a stage, a forest, a courtroom under stars. But here, in the closing act, the setting becomes even more intimate, a silent chamber within each of us, where thought is born, questioned, justified, and sometimes manipulated before it ever reaches the tongue. To read the art of controversy deeply is to confront the silent war between sincerity and ego. Schopenhauer, ever the radical anatomist of the soul, understood that the human being is a creature built not upon pure reason but upon layers: animal will, social persona, rational venir. Beneath the desire to be right lies the desire to exist securely. Beneath the act of proving another wrong lies the secret hunger to assert identity, to carve out meaning in a universe that grants none by default. These are not sins, they are human impulses, but they must be seen clearly. They must be known. This is where the transformation begins. One does not become wise through victory, but through Schopenhauer's legacy, then, is not merely a keener mind for debate, but a deeper humility before the complexity of truth. When we ask ourselves not, how can I win, but why do I need to, we begin to unshackle the intellect from the ego's grasp. When we enter a conversation not to defeat, but to explore, not to overpower, but to uncover, we align with a form of engagement that is both rarer and infinitely more meaningful. In this sense, the art of controversy becomes a spiritual text, though it never claims to be. It teaches us to discipline our speech as one disciplines a blade, lest it wound not only the other, but also the wilder. Let us pause here in the liminal space between thought and transformation, and imagine what it would mean to live this understanding. It would mean walking into each encounter, each disagreement, not with armor, but with awareness. It would mean being brave enough to ask, am I seeking truth or refuge? Am I defending an idea or protecting my sense of self? It would mean listening with the fullness of our attention, not merely to what is said, but to what it reveals. And most of all, it would mean knowing when silence carries more power than precision, when yielding is wiser than pressing forward, when the moment calls not for strategy, but for presence. This is not passivity. This is sovereignty. To stand in such integrity is not to forego the art of argument, but to refine it into something luminous. A kind of dialectical alchemy takes place. The ego, once brittle, softens. The intellect, once weaponized, becomes a bridge. We cease treating disagreement as war and begin treating it as dance, as exploration, as the sacred and maddening human effort to touch a reality larger than ourselves. If Schopenhauer's treatise begins in the underworld of verbal combat, it ends, if we follow it far enough, in the sky. The tactics he outlines, though cold and clinical, are merely the anatomy of a deeper phenomenon, the eternal dialogue between illusion and truth, between chaos and clarity. And to truly honor the text is not to become a master manipulator, nor a smug exposer of fallacies, but to become a custodian of discourse, a practitioner of mindful speech, a seeker who understands that every word spoken leaves an imprint not only on others, but on the very architecture of our being. We speak, and we are shaped. We argue, and we become. Let us then argue, not to triumph, but to transform. Let us speak not from fear, but from freedom. Let us debate not from the need to dominate, but from the desire to understand. And when we recognize that truth does not belong to us, but flows through us briefly, like wind through trees, we may finally learn to honor it in all its elusive, terrifying, beautiful fragility. This is the true art, not controversy, but clarity, not persuasion, but presence. And so, the final call is not merely to read the art of controversy, nor to wield its contents as tools. The call is to live its awareness, to become the kind of person who no longer needs to win to be whole, who no longer confuses being right with being wise, who sees every conversation as a mirror, every disagreement as a teacher, every silence as a kind of reverence. You are that person, or rather you can be. The door stands open, the will stands, waiting, and truth, delicate as a breath on glass, remains always just beyond certainty, always shimmering at the edge of silence. Will you walk toward it?